Hello, everybody. I'm Keith Warburton. I'm the CEO of Global Business Culture, and I'm here today with my colleague Antoine Figueres, who runs our Brazil operation. And what we're going to be talking about today is factoring cultural awareness and cultural knowledge into your operations when you're dealing with colleagues, clients, suppliers in Brazil. And I'm just going to ask Antoine a series of questions here and get his thoughts. Antoine obviously has been living in Brazil now for 20 odd years and is an expert on this topic. So thanks for joining me, Antoine. The first question I wanted to ask you was just a very general one, which is why would you say it's important in 2026 to factor cultural differences into your dealings in Brazil?
Thank you, Keith. As you know, Brazil is a big and complex country, and it's very important also to understand regional differences. So, when you are foreign company, it's very important for you to avoid misunderstanding with your colleagues or client in Brazil, because this could have an impact definitely on your project or your sales.
Okay. And so, one of the questions that we're most asked about when we're working with clients on these Brazilian issues is that they ask about communication styles and how communication works in Brazil. So, what would you say in answer to that?
Well, as you may know, Brazilian communication is very friendly. Brazilian in general are very welcoming, and usually they are very polite. I remember some expats that had difficulty to understand that. One of my German expat at some point asked me, Antoine, why do I have to say please all the time where when I am asking something to my assistant? And he was saying, well, it's not a favor. She's paid to do her job. What's going on? So I had to tell him, well, politeness, respectfulness is absolutely critical to build trust in Brazil with everybody.
Okay. And I think that that might differ slightly. I might be wrong here because I think that Brazil is quite a hierarchical culture. So could you talk a little bit about how that hierarchy impacts on business to relations and people to people relations?
Right. Hierarchy is important in Brazil. Most of the big decisions are taken by the top senior managers. But at the same time, they involve the team and they take the decision. In Brazil, there is a strong respect from the team to the managers. Okay, and there is also a strong loyalty within the employees. It's interesting to see that when a manager leaves the company, he might also invite some of the colleagues. So this is very important in Brazil to understand.
Yeah, I would always say to clients that one of the things you have to understand is that in a business to business relationship in Brazil, the relationship is very often person to person and not company to company. And therefore, if you have, say, a key salesman who leaves, it's likely that his clients will go with him because the loyalty is to the person, not to the organization.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
There is another point, which is you need to map the top decision maker at
yeah,
the very beginning. That's a key point.
yeah. Okay. And then, so in all the work that you do with non-Brazilians who work with Brazilians from lots of different countries in lots of different sectors, could you give us an example of a what you could call a common friction point where these cultural differences really have an impact on day-to-day performance?
The typical situation, the typical cultural shock I see in the way people communicate. Typically, you see international team sometimes sending a very blunt, cold, short message, often through emails to their counterpart in Brazil, and they expect immediate reaction, immediate tasks. It doesn't work like that in Brazil. Brazilians need more context. You need to develop trust first, and then you can work with the Brazilians. So you really need to invest more time in developing this trust and this relationship. Give more information, give more context. That's very important.
Okay, thanks very much. And finally, if a client was to say to you, okay, Antoine, could you give me one practical tip, piece of advice into how I should interact effectively in Brazil, what would you say?
I would say that one of the key points is the first connection. You really need to spend some time there. You're better off flying to Brazil, spending some days there on site, and develop this trust. Ask some question, professional question, but personal question. Once you've set this trust, you're going to save a lot of time.
Yeah, yeah. And I think probably it's important to go there, but I think it's also important not just think, oh, I've been there now, I don't need to go back.
Right, that's true. Follow up, frequent follow up are really, really important.
Yeah,
So you need to ask them what is the frequency that they would appreciate, and then do this follow up.
yeah.
Completely agree with you.
Okay. So thanks, Antoine. So this, when we look at the impact of cultural differences when you're working with Brazil and the need to factor in these cross-cultural issues, this is a really big topic, and we've just been talking about this for about five minutes or so, and so we've hardly touched the surface here. But thanks very much for your input on this, and I'm sure that going forward we'll have a few more of these conversations where we can dive into a few more issues in a bit of detail, like how do you build relationships in Brazil, or how do you navigate the hierarchy there, and we'll return to those. But for today, thanks very much, Antoine. That was great.
Thank you, Keith.